What we have here right now is a secure connection with my browser on a Windows machine to the router, and also a PuTTY connection using a SSH key to connect to the router. I was experimenting with some of the things we've been talking about, and I was surprised to find out this particular item here. If I bring up system, system users, you notice I have 3 users. These 2 are disabled right now. And I want to point out that if you're going to have extra users, make sure you disable them so that only the one user or multiple users with SSH keys can access the router. Because what I found is that a user that doesn't have an SSH key assigned to it can still access the router using a password. So you have to make sure you disable these guys. In the process of discovering all that, I also noticed something else. If you go to IP and you go to SSH, these SSH rules right here have nothing to do with our putting our own public key on the router. These only affect the keys that the router itself generates. You can change these numbers all day long, and it doesn't matter because the public key we generated in the previous lessons was generated on a separate computer, and the keys have the same size. The public and the private keys are the same size. That has nothing to do with this page. So for that reason, we were misled into believing that always allow password login was for everything, but it's not. A normal SSH connection to a user that doesn't have a key assigned to it can in fact still log in using SSH without a key. So let's demonstrate that to prove my point. Down here we have my normal connectivity, which is logged in using the, let's go back to users for a second. My normal login is right here, the add user. So I'm going to enable this test user, which has a password pass. And what we're going to do is look at SSH keys, and sure enough, the test user does have a key. It's the same key. I use the same key just to make a point here. And the active users shows that I have an SSH connection to that user, and I have a web connection to that same user. With that having been said, now that we have this user activated, let's start up another PuTTY terminal. Shift click on the icon. And now that we have another PuTTY terminal, I'm going to connect a test user. I'm going to have an SSH key. Authority. I'm going to use the same one I used before, which was under Documents. And this one. So now I'll go up here and I'll go back to my session. I'm going to go to that user using the key I just assigned to it and open it up. You notice I do in fact have the ability to use the key. Now I'm logged in with 2 different terminals using keys. See, active users. Notice they're both using SSH keys. It doesn't say keys, but we know that those 2 have keys, so they have to be keys. They won't connect without a key. So what I've demonstrated here is that our router is still secure. No one can get in without this private key, no matter which username you use. But now let's activate the admin. It has this particular password. And we're going to go down here and we're going to start a 3rd terminal. We'll bring it up and we'll just go for the name, which is admin. without any keys. And notice once password, and we're logged in. So we had a security hole here by having this admin account active when in fact had no keys assigned to it. Whereas in previous videos I thought that according to the SSH down here, it wouldn't allow password logins. This is not true. These parameters only affect keys generated by the MikroTik itself. Now you go back to the manual and it doesn't say a word about this. It just mentions these phrases and what they mean. It doesn't tell you what it relates to, but it only relates to, as far as I can tell, is keys generated by the router itself. So this concludes the fix to something I said in previous videos, that this screen has nothing to do with our public keys that we place on the router. They only affect the keys generated by the router itself. So that concludes this little discussion. And last but not least, under Tools and Mac Servers, always make sure that your Mac servers are all turned off. Because if any Mac server is active, then you can use that to bypass the SSH key, private key, and this has to be none, and then also Mac ping server has to not be enabled. So by disabling users that don't have SSH key access and making sure all your Mac servers are turned off, and then going and making sure that your services for the services doesn't use your SSH keys. In this case, I'd have to make sure my Winbox is turned off and my SSL is disabled. Once all that's done, then your router is in fact secure and safe from configuration changes from external sources. So that concludes this video. I just want to clarify those issues.